This here is a demo for the UV unwrapping, some tips and tricks and some adjustments that can be made on some of these objects that you have been working on. Starting off with this workbench here, and as you can see we have a UV texture here, and I'm going to select that, and as you can see we have this is a nicely UV'd workbench. The top here is nicely done, but as you can see there's a section here that's not quite working and we have to make an adjustment on it. So I have the UV texture editor open, and the first thing that you will notice is that it's really hard to see the UVs against this background. The contrast of the white is just a little too much and you can't see the UV edges and lines here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to this little button here, and it's a little face and it's a dim image on and off, and I'm just going to click that on, and now I've dimmed the image and I can see the UV edges and faces a little bit better. Now there's a couple ways that we can go about fixing this section here, and the thing that you're going to want to do is that we could just do a UV unwrap on this, and it can get messy, but it's best to UV unwrap it and take it in sections. So I'm going to go into the viewport and I'm going to grab faces, and I'm going to select just the faces. I'm going to shift select just the faces of that section here, and as you can see I have it down here, and you can see what part of the UV unwrap corresponds with what I have selected here. And as you can see, if I go in a little closer, you can see that it's just it's not a clean UV unwrap. We have an edge here that's kind of pointing out this way. It's all stacked up on each other and at a diagonal. And so now that I have that selected, I'm going to go into, I'm in the polygons menu set, create UVs, and I'm going to start with a cylindrical map. Now as you can see, the cylindrical map didn't come in the way that I wanted to. It's oriented not in the correct rotation. So if I go and I select this little handle over here, not the big handles, but this little red handle here, I can adjust that. I'm going to start by just scaling up the size of that cylindrical mapping section there, and then I'm going to rotate it into position. Now because I'm not squared up, I'm basically in I'm in the perspective mode. I'm going to have to kind of go in and just sort of eyeball it in here, and we can fix this later. So there we go. So I've rotated it kind of 45 degrees and 45 degrees into this angle. I'm going to straighten it out there. Zoom out a little bit, and as you can see this is now working a little better, but the size of it, just because the size of the UV has now gotten so big, it's the squares are not the same. I'm just going to adjust it a little bit that way. So I basically fixed it to a certain point, but the UV size is not the same. So now I'm going to go into the UV editor here, and I'm going to select, I'm going to right mouse UVs, I'm going to select a UV, and I'm going to select shell. If I go into here, select shell, that will select what I just UV'd, and you can see how big it is. That's why the bigger the UV in here, the smaller the UV texture is. So I'm gonna, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move this out of the way, get it out of the way here, and it's not completely square here, and I'm going to need to fix that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it down just a bit to get to the UV size that I want. I can bring it into this corner here, and I'm going to select just those UVs on that side there, and I'm going to select the scale tool, and I'm just going to scale them down. Now what you can see what's happening is if I scale it on one axis, it's going to straighten those it's going to straighten those points there. I'm going to show you this over here. See how that's curved there? I'm going to select just those UV points there, and I'm just going to scale them all the way like that, and it's squared them up just like that. The other thing you can do is you can select just a point there, and you can pressing the X, you can Control Z, you can snap those to a point on the grid. So a point on the grid would be, well, let's just don't show that message again. Let's just move this a little bit more on the grid like that, and move it up like that, and I'm going to start snapping these points to the grid. And basically making a square section like that, and I'm going to select shell. Here's a little trick. If I go into this menu here and press the select menu, I can actually tear it off by just clicking on that little section there, and I can keep that menu open. If I use select shell a lot, I like to keep this menu sort of I like to keep it available. So now what I can do here is, looking at my UV texture, looking at my UV grid here, I can start to adjust the scale, and there we go. Start making those squares just like that. Might need to bring it out like that, and that's pretty good. I could probably mess with that a little more, but what I've basically done is let's see if we make it about the same. I basically made that UV texture the same as I have the other textures here. Let's move on to another one. Let's go to the pot. Now let's look here at what's going on in this UV texture. This basically was UV'd, and some of these UV shells were scaled down, and we have what's here is this triangle here. And if you look at this, I'm going to select just that triangle there. So I'm going to select let's go to UVs. I'm going to select a point there, select a shell, and let's move this out of the way so we can see what's going on. So that's a separated shell that's been separated out, and what that is, that's the inside, the bottom of the pot there. And you see what's going on there. So let's scale this down so we have a little bit more manageable area to work with. So what's actually happening is that there's all these little triangles in here that make up the bottom, inside bottom, are all stacked up on each other. And that's why you're getting sort of that weird psychedelic looking effect there, because they're all, each one of those triangles corresponds with the triangle here, and they're all kind of stacked up on each other, so there's however many are in here. Now what I can do is I can select all of those inside of the pot there and do a planar map, or if you couldn't do that for some reason, I'm going to go to edge, and I'm just going to select an edge, and let's go to polygons, and I'm going to tear off that menu there, and I'm going to move and sew UV edges. And what that did is that selected those it selected those edges, and it took that stacked up UV and it moved it to that connecting edge. And that's a pretty powerful thing to do sometimes, and that's something that you're going to do in UV texture editing more and more. So I'm going to keep on doing that. If I press G, that moves it, that keeps doing the move and so. And I'm going to do that. And I'm going to go all the way around here. And let's just go there. Alright, so now I've got this, you know, kind of mostly done, and I'm going to I'm going to go to UVs. I'm going to select the UV and tear that off. And I'm going to select shell, and I'm going to unfold. Oh, that didn't do what I needed to do. Hold on, let's undo that. And let's go to edge. I think I need to do more edges. So move and sew UV edges. And let's just see how many we can do. And let's go UVs, select a UV, select shell, and unfold. Still didn't do as much as I'd like it to do. Let's undo that and go to edges and move and sew, move and sew, move and sew. That. Let's go to UVs, select a UV, select shell, and unfold. There we go. Well, let's just let's see if we can continue on with doing it here. Let's go edge and move and sew. So there we go. I think that just about did it. Move and sew. And let's see if we can just undo. Let's just see if we can make this one continuous piece and unfold. Almost. Go to edge. Move and sew. Move and sew. There we go. Let's see if this will move and sew. Okay, let's try this one more time. Let's UV, select shell, unfold. There we go. So now it's all unfolded. So I had to do that a few times.